So welcome to this week's class, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Bo. So let me, with your permission, just share the, there we go, share the PowerPoint with you. Today's class, the topic of today's class is You Are Never Alone. And this theme really resonated with me this week. What's interesting is I find that as I prepare and I read through so much material, there's so much we can learn, but I always feel like then there's something that strikes a chord, and that's the thing I end up teaching. So this is what struck a chord with me this week. So just a little context. So this week's Parsha, we continue the last three of the 10 plagues, right? We talked about that last week a little. So the last 3 plagues are described in this week's Parsha, and then of course culminating with the exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt. So it's actually an amazing Parsha, because in this week's Parsha, the Jewish people finally leave Egypt. So the Parsha, the Torah portion begins, it's called Parshat Bo, because the Torah portion begins with the words Bo, Bo el Paro. So let's read the opening verse of this week's Torah portion, and I'll read it in English. The Hebrew is also up there on the screen. The Lord said to Moses, "Come to Paro, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, in order that I may place these signs of mine in his midst." So Hashem is telling Moshe, I want you now, Hashem is instructing Moshe, I want you to come to Paro and warn Paro about the upcoming plague and demand that he release the Jewish people. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe taught us that the name of the Torah portion, the name of the Parsha, teaches us the central theme of the Parsha. And since the name of each Torah portion conveys its primary message, the Rebbe has a question about the name of this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo. What does Bo mean? Bo means come to Paro. So it seems that from the context of this word Bo, that we're not talking about the extraordinary exodus, right? It seems like the climax of the Parsha would be the Jewish people's freedom, or they're finally free, they're finally leaving Egypt, but rather the name of the Parsha, Come to Paro, reminds us of the opposite. It reminds us still of our slavery and Moshe's need to petition to Parai and appeal to Parai to free the Jewish people. So the Rebbe asks, why is this Parsha called Bo if we would think the highlight of the Parsha, or the climax of the Parsha, is discussing the Exodus and is discussing freedom? Bo seems to imply the opposite of freedom. And even more so, think about what the proper usage, right, grammatically, the proper usage, if Hashem's telling Moshe, I want you to go to Paro to warn him about the next plague that is pending, it would be more appropriate for Hashem to tell Moshe, Lech al Paro, go to Paro. But Hashem doesn't use the term Lech, go. Hashem uses the term Bo, and Bo means to come. So the Rebbe and many commentaries question the usage of this term, come to Paro, instead of the more appropriate form, which would be go to Paro. Okay? And so that is a very fundamental question, and the question that we're going to address today in the class. What is the message of Bo el Paro, come to Paro, and why is this terminology used specifically instead of go, which would seemingly feel more appropriate? So the Zohar, for those of you not familiar with the Zohar is the fundamental text of Kabbalah, addresses this question. And the Zohar says something very, very fascinating. Moshe, at this moment, after Moshe had already, 7 plagues already befell the Egyptians. Moshe is about to warn Paro about plague number 8. And all of a sudden, at this moment, Moshe was terrified to go to Paro. Now, Moshe had been to Paro so many times before, many, many, many times. Why was he suddenly seized by fear? What happened? And the Zohar explains that on earlier occasions, Moshe met Paro in other places. He met Paro in, such as Paro's morning excursions to the Nile. Moshe would meet him there, or Moshe would meet him not in his innermost chamber. This time, however, when it came to this moment, Moshe is about to warn Paro about plague number 8. Moshe was summoned to enter into Paro's innermost chamber, into the hub of his power. And the Zohar explains what this represents. Paro was the king of Egypt. And we know that at that time, Egypt was the most immoral place. Egypt represented immorality, wickedness, evil. And we know, and because everything in this world is reflective of its spiritual source in heaven, so Paro, who's the king, who's the mighty monarch, who's the ruler of Egypt, represents the root powers of evil in this world. So at this moment, Moshe, who was a tremendous tzaddik, who was a holy person, at this moment, Moshe realized that he is about to have a face-off with the very root of evil, with the very root of unholiness, with the very root of klipa. And he recognized that he wasn't simply talking to an evil person, but he was communicating with someone who represents the source of it all, the power, the energy of unholiness. And Moshe understood this, he saw this, and he was terrified. And he's thinking in his mind, how can I have a face-off with the spiritual root of evil, with the source of unholiness, with the source of klipa? How can I face Paro? So what does the Zohar say? Hashem says, you're right, Moshe. You're not going alone. Bo el Paro, Hashem tells Moshe, come with me. We will go together. When I tell you to stand up to Paro, to destroy Paro, to face the root of all the wicked and the immorality and the evil of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, you are not doing it on your own. I am right there with you, by your side. And therefore, the Zohar says, Bo el Paro. Not go to Paro, you're not going alone. Come to Paro. Come with me to Paro. And Hashem promises Moshe that Hashem himself will accompany Moshe on this journey. Go to Paro. Loich al Paro would not have done the trick. Moshe was too scared to go. But come to Paro means that I will be with you. And I want you to be able to see the mystical words of the Zohar inside. To quote the Zohar explains, and I'll put it up on the screen just so you can see it. The Zohar describes how Hashem takes Moshe chamber within chamber, level within level, until he reached the inner chamber of evil. And the Zohar calls this level of evil the great serpent. And I'll read the Zohar. God summoned Moshe into a chamber within a chamber to the unique, supernal, and mighty serpent. But Moshe was afraid. Until this point, Moshe had only approached the river surrounding the serpent. And he was scared to approach the serpent itself, because Moshe saw how profound its roots were on high. And here is where Hashem tells Moshe, Bo el Parai, you're not going to be facing off with evil alone. I will be there with you. We will be there together. Why did this Zohar resonate so much with me? What is so relevant about the message of Bo el Parai for you and for me? Because we all have areas in our life of struggle, of challenges, of difficulties, and this represents our Egypt. We all have Egypts, right? Actually, if you look at the root word of Egypt in Hebrew, Mitzrayim comes from the root word of Meitzar. Meitzar means narrowness, limitations. So we all have areas in our life where we're stuck. We reach a point where we are struggling. It's a challenge. It's a low point. And we want to liberate ourselves, right? Liberate ourselves, have an experience in Exodus, just like our ancestors did. And so the message of this parsha, so powerful. Hashem says that whether you are facing difficulties internally or externally, however you are facing your own internal evils, your own internal challenges, your own internal limitations, know that you're not doing it alone. Hashem says, he says, come with me, Bo el Parai. I might be hidden, but I'm with you. Somehow this makes me very emotional this morning. Hashem never tells us, go deal with your problems alone. Hashem says, Bo, come, because he is with us. And knowing Hashem is with us just gives us that confidence that we can face whatever we are facing, and we have Hashem's support. And it's interesting because this ties in so very much with something we were discussing on our Sunday night class. But for those of you who were not there Sunday, we spoke about creating a box for Hashem. And we spoke about having a tangible box in our home where we can literally write notes, write things down, write things that are troubling us, let go of it, and put it in the box. And it's literally like a concrete way, first and foremost, of letting go, of not holding on so much, but most importantly, knowing that we are not alone, Bo el Parai, that Hashem is with us, that we can share, that we can communicate, that we can reach out to him when we're at a weak moment. That is so encouraging. And I myself experience this. I just experienced this yesterday. We had a very, very big challenge that we were dealing with. And I have been so stressed about this for weeks. And it's so unlike me. As a matter of fact, I was telling people, why am I so anxious about this? Like, I usually don't get so caught up like this. And it kind of reached a peak yesterday, where I felt panicky. I felt like, how am I gonna help myself? I need to help myself. And I did what we spoke about on Sunday. And I took a paper and I literally wrote, I said, Hashem, this is becoming too much. I can't carry this burden alone. I'm gonna give this burden over to you. I'm letting go of it. and I'm giving this burden over to you. I had no idea yesterday how this is going to be resolved, but I knew that in order to heal myself and to move on, I need to be able to give this up. This morning at 9:13 a.m., I got an email. The situation is completely resolved. I'm crying as I'm saying this because I'm like in disbelief. But I feel that this couldn't have happened until I was ready to let go of it. Until I was ready to know that, to admit that Hashem is with me. He has my back. He's going to take care of me. But as long as I was trying to control the situation, control the scene, this was going on for weeks and weeks. So this is the message in this week's Parsha, that we are never alone. But there's also another very, very powerful lesson, another idea that I learned from the message, from the story here, Bo El Pare. We have all sorts of challenges that we deal with. Some are big and some are small. But if you're human, like me, you may find that sometimes our most difficult challenges, or the ones that run so deep, the challenges that give us the most pain, are hardest to deal with, so we avoid it, or we try to distract ourselves, or we just procrastinate, right? I'd rather deal with the small stuff, like what am I making for dinner, or what are the kids doing for the summer, than deal with big problems, because it's just, we're human, right? But what's interesting is that in this week's Parsha, Moshe is about to approach Paro, communicate with Paro, face off with Paro, who at the core of evil, where my internal evil is the strongest. And he needs to do this in order for the exodus, for freedom to happen. So we say all the time, well, I have an area that's difficult and impossible for me to overcome, but I'm going to leave that aside for now, and I'm going to just pick the areas that I can handle. But the lesson in this week's Parsha is that in order for Exodus to happen, Moshe has to face off with the root of all evils, fight with it, deal with it, and overcome it. And for us as well, in order to affect real change in our life, we need to face our hardest challenges. And for every one of us, that's different. And it's sometimes very painful. And sometimes you even need support going through it. And this is why Hashem says, and the Zohar explains, Bo El Paro. Hashem says, when you are about to confront your most difficult, your most painful, the deepest pain in your heart, I am with you. You're not alone. And here God is inviting Moshe to confront the essence of the Egyptian ruler. And Moshe was the shepherd of the Jewish people, right? He's the ultimate parent of our people. He tends to each and every one of our needs. And Moshe's conduct teaches us how to help ourselves, how to help our children through their respective enslavements, constrictions, or challenges. And the Torah teaches us that in order to free someone from the constraints, from the narrowness, Mitzrayim, from their problems, from their fears, from their phobias, from their insecurities, we have to face off with it head on. We have to face off with that pare. So don't dismiss your children or your own issues as insignificant. You don't need to reassure your child that, or yourself, this is little. It will pass. Hashem's actually telling us, no, we have to face each and every issue head on, validate it, don't distract. Experience your pain, experience your frustration, experience your insecurity, explore that feeling, validate that feeling, picture that feeling, understand what's inhibiting your growth, and know that we have Hashem with us, and we can face our deepest and strongest and most painful challenges with Hashem at our side. And only then, only when we get to the root of things, can we merit to leave our Egypt. And I just think this is so powerful. You know, what's amazing about Torah is that you read about, you read in Torah what psychologists are talking about, what psychiatrists are talking about, what coaches and mentors are talking about. This is all in Torah. How do we heal ourselves? From Torah. So I want to conclude with a very powerful poem, a poem that I found years and years ago that I clipped, and I read it. I bring it up every so often just as a reminder. It's even something that I would sometimes put up on my fridge or up on the pin board in our dinette, and it very much connects to this idea, Bo El Paro. So I'm going to put it up on the screen. The poem is called Footprints in the Sand. So you find it online. Sometimes I think it was written by a Christian, actually. I couldn't find the author, but this is the poem, and I'll read it out loud. One night, I dreamed a dream. As I was walking along the beach with God, across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene, I noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and the other one to God. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the very lowest and saddest times in my life, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked God about it. God, you said you'd walk with me all the way, but I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why. When I needed you the most, you would leave me? He whispered, my precious child, I love you and will never leave you. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you. So that didn't make you cry. That makes me cry every time. But that is the message of this Parsha. You're welcome to unmute yourself at this point. But I think the messages are so powerful. Number one, that when we face our challenges, when we're facing our evils, when we're facing our powers, we're never alone. And number two, that in order to experience true liberation, we have to sometimes get to the root of the evil, get to the root of the struggle, and that's the message of this parsha. So thank you